Yeah, I mean, I just think the talent on this team is overwhelming. I think people really don't realize how good Josh Richardson is, and I think that as a result, people have kind of just slept on this team. I mean, Horford and Josh Richardson are just so good, and I'm a little worried about what Harris turns into this season, but I feel like he's well suited for that kind of like the third or fourth banana type guy. And Horford we know is. So I just see this team kind of gelling. I think they'll be really good, but we'll see. Anyways, we've talked enough about the Sixers. Let's get to the team that we really want to talk about,
Wait a
Jason.
second. You're
Oh,
pulling
oh,
a Jason. We got to get
oh
to the
man.
over-unders. And that's my bad because I do the show notes and we kind of put the over-unders like under everything we write up. So this one's on me. But this one's kind of easy because DraftKings set this so high. 53 and a half. We're not going to waste your time. I don't think they're winning 54 games. The division is one of the best, if not the best in the league. And I think they'll be good. I think they could win 50, but 54 is a little too steep for me. So I'm going to take the under.
I think the under here, I think you can very easily make a case that they'll win the title and not win 54 games because they're going to rest their guys. As I said, I would be shocked if Horford or Embiid played over 65 games this year. I think they're going to both get rest. With those guys not playing, any other injuries, it's just too easy to see them winning less than this. I think it's a no-brainer to go under.
Absolutely. All right. I believe you were about to toss me up a T-ball.
Yes,
I
please
got the bat
just
in my hand.
wax poetic about your Brooklyn Nets, Jason.
Oh, we've been waiting so long. Well, I've been waiting so long, even though I think you're a pseudo Nets fan now. I mean, we've been singing Brooklyn's praises since June 30th because I think they had their best offseason in franchise history. Kevin Durant, future Hall of Famer, is a Brooklyn Net. Kyrie Irving, potential future Hall of Famer, all-star point guard, is a Brooklyn Net. That's right, Ben. Two superstars signed with the Nets. 3 years ago, when Marks and Atkinson took over, this was something that I never dreamed would be possible, at least not in 2019. I thought the Nets would be bad for a while. They've righted that ship. They have superstars. They have new ownership. Joseph Tsai, shouts to him. They have a new CEO, David Levy, formerly of TNT. They have new uniforms. They have a new court. Robin Lundberg, whose radio show was one of my favorites when he was on the 4 a.m. shift at ESPN New York. He's now at Sports Illustrated. He deemed them the coolest team in sports. So this offseason was, aside from the Kuruks allegations and the Wilson Chandler suspension, could not have gone any better. This is unbelievable ground for the Nets. They have their core from last year. You bring in Durant, Irving, DeAndre Jordan, Torian Prince, Garrett Temple. You got Nick Claxton, who's shown some flashes in the preseason as a rookie. You have Levert back, Jared Allen, Dinwiddie, Harris, Kuruks, Musa. I mean, Ben, this is like the best team Kenny Atkinson has ever had to coach, don't you think?
I, I absolutely do, and I think they're being slept on, particularly because I think if you hear one criticism of this team, Jason, I want to get your thoughts. I think the most common critique is of Kyrie Irving, and I think a lot of people are questioning two things about Irving. One is his commitment to leadership and his ability to do that. Now, I think first and foremost, even the people who question him will acknowledge that he had a very sunny first year in Boston, and I think it would be surprising for that not to be the case in Brooklyn with all the baggage. I think the more relevant one, and I wanted to get your thoughts on this, is his injury history. I was talking to a friend of mine here in Pittsburgh yesterday. I personally feel like Irving's injury history has been just bad luck. That it's been a lot of these kind of funky injuries, eye injuries, face injuries, infections to surgical sites, things like this that just aren't happening over and over again, that they're just kind of these fluke injuries, and he's had bad luck. I wanted to get your thoughts. Do you think there's a concern for the Nets if Kyrie gets injured? And how likely do you think that is? I mean, are you worried about his health?
Okay, of course there's concern. You know, Kyrie Irving's not on his third team by chance. Okay, he wanted out of Cleveland, and Boston wanted out of him, even though I think it was mutual. I said this when he signed, Ben. This is his last chance at a respectable reputation in the NBA. And so far, he's said all the right things. He's done all the right things. He organized workouts in LA because Kevin Durant obviously couldn't participate, got a lot of guys to go out there. He's developing a nice rapport with Karis LeVert because the two of them are going to carry this team until Durant is ready. But of course, the injury history scares me. The knee, and then Sean Marks and Kenny Atkinson are supposed to speak right before media day, and Kenny has to bail on the presser because Kyrie was elbowed in the face during a pickup game and had to go to the hospital, ends up getting diagnosed with a facial fracture, tries to make his preseason debut in the first game against the Lakers in Shanghai, and Rondo elbows him in the face. Of course, Rajon Rondo does it 1 minute in. So the Nets are 3-0 in the preseason, and Kyrie Irving has played 1 minute. Now, granted, if it were the regular season, I think Kyrie would have put his mask on and play. But of course you're concerned. Until I see him out there and not chucking up 30 shots a night and getting his fill, because he's got the best handles in the NBA. You know, he can get to the rim at will. I want to see him pass the ball to Harris on the wing. I want to see him play together with Dinwiddie. I want to see him feed the ball to Prince, who is an excellent three-point shooter. We'll get on him next. I want to see him throwing lobs to DeAndre Jordan and Jared Allen. I need to see that all-around game because Kyrie Irving will be asked to lead this team until Kevin Durant's ready. Now, the injury history, of course, is a little nerve-wracking, but he's played with the mask before. He's played well. I just want to see him on the court when the games count because I don't think he's going to play in the final preseason game. So we're not really going to have the answer to this question until the regular season starts, the real answer.
Yeah, I mean, I just think he's had a few of these injuries that have been legitimate, but I was looking while you were talking, I was looking to see if I could find the full list of injuries because he's had just all these kind of crazy injuries. And I want to find this. If I can find it later, we'll have to bring it up. But it's really interesting because I've never seen so many just kind of random injuries. Like I remember he broke his hand smacking it into something. He had the facial injury. He had the infection. I mean, a friend of mine here, shout out to Damon Young out here in Pittsburgh, had mentioned that there's just some guys who just are injury prone, and that's just kind of the way they are. And I guess I'm just not sure if that's Irving or not. I think if you look at it empirically, obviously you would say yes, it is because he has missed a lot of games. But I feel like on some level it's been bad luck. And I guess that's what I think if you're a Nets fan, one of the things you're hoping for. I think, to be honest, Jason, I want to get your thoughts on this. I think it starts and ends. Any conversation about the Nets being, better than people are expecting this year and either a top 4 seed or even a title contender start with Kyrie Irving ratcheting it up to the next level.
And I think that he can. This is the one thing people are forgetting. He's home now, Ben. He's not in Boston. He's not in Cleveland. He's out of excuses. He got paid. He's 20 miles from where he grew up. His family and friends can come see him play every night. They can go to the Garden, watch them play the Knicks. They get to see Kyrie Irving 43 times a year in the regular season in this area, in New York City. So he's out of excuses. However, I know these Celtics teams had a lot of young pieces with Tatum and Brown and Gordon Hayward before the injury, but I truly believe that Brooklyn's core is better than what the Celtics have because of the emergence of Joe Harris and Dinwiddie and Allen and Jordan, 2 legitimate centers that one of them is going to be on the floor at all times. You have Taurean Prince, who could still develop into a great player. I mean, he's got a lot of options to play with. He's not expected to be a one-man band. And then he's got his best friend in the NBA, one of the best players to ever do this, waiting in the wings to come back. So this is tailor-made for Kyrie Irving to be successful. And if he's not, then his career will go down as something that's not too pretty when you look back on his legacy that he's leaving.
Well, you hit on a few things there, and I wanted to get your thoughts. I think the first is, can Atkinson and this team, can that culture withstand what we saw in Boston? And I mean, do you think Atkinson has it in him to both coach Irving, who I just want to note, one thing that I think people forget is that Kyrie Irving's usage last year, which is essentially a measure of how many possessions he ends with the ball in some way, was actually much lower than I think people think it is. It's significantly lower than, say, Kemba Walker, who is the new point guard. It was not an incredibly high number at all, in fact, Jason, with Boston. So, I mean, I think that's interesting, and that's a good place to start here. But what do you think of Atkinson and the culture, and how do you think they're going to integrate him onto this team?
So that's the one question, right? Like the Nets lost half of their team, and a lot of the guys who bought into that culture, the Damari Carrolls, the Ed Davises. But I think they started early. They came into this team and they saw that there's a culture already in place. That's what got them here. Kevin Durant looked and said, I want to be a part of that. So I don't think the culture is going to be anything to worry about too much. I think if Kyrie Irving goes off the rails at all, he has KD there to kind of talk him down. He's got his family and friends close by. And Atkinson has shown that he is not afraid to coach tough players. I mean, you saw what D'Angelo Russell's reputation was when he came over from the Lakers, and Atkinson coached him into an all-star, right? He's at his best with point guards, with playmakers. So I think it's a nice tandem. Atkinson will need Irving. Irving will need Atkinson. You have Jacques Vaughn still there, who played point guard in the NBA. So I think Kyrie Irving at this stage of his career, Ben, will want to be coached. And I think that's going to go a long way. This culture has to be the same as it was. Otherwise, this thing is not going to work. This culture has to be what Mark started. And I think even with the superstars, even with DeAndre Jordan coming and his ego and his personality, I think these guys want to be a part of that culture. They want to fit in seamlessly. They don't want to be the guy that ruins what they've built. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. And I think one of the things that's going to be really interesting here is what they do as they kind of wait for Kevin Durant. They wait for this guy who, I mean, I think everyone's hoping, I think anyone who's a real basketball fan is hoping that Durant comes back at least 95% of who he was. I mean, that was a terrible injury. I think everyone's wishing him the best. I mean, he's one of those guys that I think if you really like basketball, you have to appreciate Durant. He's one of the best all-around players, and I think, Kendrick Perkins got in some hot water for saying that he was the best scorer. And I think what he really meant was that Durant can really score from any part of the floor in a way that few players ever have. And so I think the question that comes from this is just, how do the Nets sort of balance the fact that they have this season without Durant and they can't just throw it away, obviously, Jason. They have to put out their full effort, but also being able to pair that with the fact that Durant might come back this year, maybe in the playoffs, but more likely that he's going to be back next year, and that then this team is going to kind of become his team.
I'm of the mindset that Durant's out for the year, right? So it's Kyrie Irving, it's Karis LeVert, and then it's the supporting cast. Now, I mentioned earlier the Nets are 3-0 in the preseason, and Kyrie Irving's only played a minute. Karis LeVert missed most of the first game against the Lakers. They're an actual team now. Okay, they looked really good in the preseason, and that's what makes things okay for me, I think, because they have guys like Spencer Dinwiddie, who was going to man that second unit. You have DeAndre Jordan, who if Jared Allen wins the starting center job, he'll be fine coming off the bench. You have Joe Harris, who was the leading three-point shooter in the NBA last year. And then you have this next guy who I think is going to play the bulk of the minutes at the 4 while KD is recovering, and that's Taurean Prince. Taurean Prince is a guy that the Hawks gave up, okay, to get that first-round pick and allow Marks the cap space to pull this heist off in the offseason. So Taurean Prince was basically given away for nothing. This guy was drafted a few spots ahead of Karis LeVert, looked really good in Mike Budenholzer's offense. And then when Lloyd Pierce got there, was kind of phased out. Now, playing for Kenny in a similar system to what Bud did, he's going to thrive like you cannot believe, Ben. I mean, he's been shooting the lights out of the ball from 3 during this preseason. He's going to see a lot of minutes at the 4. And I know there's issues with Rodions Kurucs and his legal allegations. I know Wilson Chandler suspended 25 games. I know they have Lance Thomas now who will play in limited capacity. But Taurean Prince is that 4 there. He can stretch the floor. Atkinson has challenged him to defend, and he's doing that so far. And I think if Taurean Prince can step up and be that 4th leg behind LeVert, Irving, and Dinwiddie, I think this Nets team is going to go a lot farther than people are currently pegging them to go.
Well, the guy who I think is really the X factor, and I have one more thought here before we get to ceilings, floors, and over-unders, but I think Karis LeVert's the X factor because I think Karis LeVert has all-star potential. I think a lot of people feel like the Nets have a single all-star this year on this team, and I genuinely feel like this is set up for Kyrie Irving to have an MVP type year. I think that if you're really looking here, he's going to have the highest usage he's ever had. He's going to have an excellent medical staff who around the league is well known. And don't sleep on the fact that Kevin Durant looked at the medical staff in Golden State, looked at the medical staff in Brooklyn, and decided he wanted to go to Brooklyn after the injury. And I don't think that that's a small thing. And I think it's going to be very meaningful for Irving, who's a guy